Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen and Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. With much of 2024 already behind us, we thought it was a good time to take a look at where we stand with some of the critical issues that have faced the cattle industry over this past year. And joining us now is Colin Woodall, CEO of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Colin, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with traceability, hot topic. And several years ago, the industry came together, built a strategic plan. One of the four key objectives was to make traceability a reality. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing on that front.
Animal disease traceability is a hot topic within the industry. But before we get into that, I think it's important to realize that NCBA's policy makes it very clear that we are not pushing for a mandatory system. Regardless, we understand the benefits that an animal disease traceability system brings in the event of a foreign animal disease outbreak. Foreign animal disease would include things such as foot and mouth disease. And it's a matter of when, not if, we get foot and mouth disease again. And we know that animals that are enrolled in an animal disease traceability program will help us to locate the outbreak, to be able to isolate, contain that outbreak, prevent it from spreading, and then work on recovery. And recovery is key because we know that when we get to that point in our response, those animals that are identified are going to have a much easier time getting back into the channels of commerce than those animals that aren't. And that's an area we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about. It's a pretty cheap insurance policy to ensure that you can get back into commerce. And the only way we can do this is by working with our partners, USDA, the state animal health officials, and also service providers such as IMI Global and US Cattle Trace.
You mentioned US Cattle Trace, and I know one of the key issues has been who's holding this data. Tell us more about US Cattle Trace and how folks can learn more about that producer-led organization.
US Cattle Trace came out of several pilot projects that were done in Florida, Texas, and in Kansas. And when those were done, everybody realized that there was something to this. Because one of the biggest questions that we have had throughout the discussion of traceability over several decades now is, how do we keep that information confidential? How do we ensure that it's just not put out there for everybody to gain access to? And we know in order to do that, USDA cannot maintain or house that data. It has to be in a private database. And that is the service that US Cattle Trace provides. They can hold that data, they can protect that data, and work with USDA in the event of an animal disease outbreak in providing only 4 points. That is the date, the time, the location, and that particular animal's number. That's all that USDA needs, and that's all that US Cattle Trace will be able to provide. So we encourage everybody to look at US Cattle Trace and consider being a part of that program. You can find out more at uscattletrace.org.
And they can only query that, right, if in the event of a disease outbreak.
That is correct. So this is not just out of curiosity. There has to be an official animal disease outbreak or emergency declared, and that is when USDA would be able to work with US Cattle Trace in order to get that information.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Big election year. Colin, tell us what is at stake for our industry.
Everything's at stake because think about it. Here we are. We have an election where the White House, the House, and the Senate are all in very close races. And really, it's a jump ball, anybody's game. And we know that whoever wins, not just the presidential election, but also control of the House and Senate are gonna have a huge impact on us as cattle producers, especially when you consider that at the end of 2025, we're gonna start seeing the expiration of a lot of the great tax cuts and programs that we were able to include in the 2017 tax bill. So in order for us to protect ourselves as cattle producers and make sure that we don't see a return of the death tax at lower exemption levels, we're going to need a Washington, D.C. that's willing to recognize that and work with us. So that's why we're really engaged in watching these races closely.
That's why we appreciate all the boots on the ground you all have back there. Thank you for what you and your entire staff does on behalf of the U.S. cattle industry.
Thank you, Kevin.
Raising cattle is your top priority. Keeping you in business is ours. And one of the best ways you can support these efforts is by becoming a member of NCBA. Just call 866-233-3872 or you can visit the website ncba.org. Use the promo code C2C and you'll receive a voucher for a free 1-liter bottle of Sidectin Pour-On.